Good evening, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me, you can see me. Slightly different setup tonight to try and overcome some of the tech issues that we had when we were doing this every night last week. So thank you very much if you've come back again. I do really appreciate it. And also really lovely to see so many of you talking on here in the chat long before we went live. I've been dropping in and out all afternoon since I set this up, and it's been brilliant. The discussion has been going on. This is a big talking point, of course, one of the biggest things to happen in Formula One, well, since Australia, really, isn't it? The news that Sebastian Vettel has announced his departure from Ferrari at the end of this season, and it's caused a lot of discussion, and it's lovely to see you guys taking the opportunity to do that here on this platform. Let's have a quick hello from where you are. I just saw somebody from Hampshire in the UK, Ren T in Lincoln in the UK as well. Thank you, nice scene. Yeah, I've made some changes, and let me know what you think of this, but you've got the comments now scrolling up the screen. It just makes it much easier for me. I hope it makes it easier for some of you as well. Hi, Alex Lamas from New York City. Hello there, watching from South Africa, Rudy van Rensburg. Who else have we got? Hemel Hempstead, not a million miles from here. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining. Missouri in USA, Sulu 244. Las Vegas, Marc McLennan. Thank you very much. Hello from Indiana. All the guys from the States on tonight. Thank you very much for joining. Who else have we got? Maryland, USA. Lake Tahoe. Germany, there we go, we've got a German in the house. We'll get into that discussion. I'm sure you can come back and let your thoughts be known about what you think about Sebastian Vettel leaving Ferrari. Will he be leaving the sport? All of that to come over the next, I don't know how long this is going to be. We'll talk for at least half an hour and we'll see how it's going. If there's a lot of you that want to keep going, we'll keep going. Beer o'clock can be put on hold for me tonight, and we will get as much chat as we can because this is a really big talking point. More people from Germany, from Edinburgh, Washington DC, from Ireland, Canada, Somerset, Richard Northover, hello to you. North Yorkshire, Chris Jones, Los Angeles, Chizang, thank you very much, all of you, for joining. I always find this bit amazing to see how many people have joined from literally all over the world. What an amazing platform we've got here, and what an amazing community we've built here together on YouTube. And of course, it's as much down to you guys as it is that anything that I've done, so I really appreciate that. Okay. There's no point beating around the bush. Let's get into this. It's big news. Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari to part company at the end of the 2020 season. The first thing to say about that, and we'll get into whether we're surprised, whether we think it's a good move or not, but the 2020 season is such a weird season anyway. We may get no racing. And so when I did a video on Tuesday, I think it was, wasn't it, yesterday, talking about my reaction to the news initially, one of the first things I said was it's a real shame. And I think it's a real shame for the fact that Sebastian never managed to achieve his dreams with Ferrari, and we can get into the reasons why if you want to in a bit. But also it's a real shame that he's going to leave at least his Ferrari career, if not his Formula One career, in a season where, first of all, we may get no racing. There is still a possibility Sebastian Vettel may have driven his last race for Ferrari. Let's not forget that. There's also the possibility that he may run his last race for Ferrari with no fans in attendance. And that would be a real shame, wouldn't it, for somebody of his stature in the sport to not get the send-off in front of the fans that I'm sure he would love and probably so richly deserves. I know that he's made mistakes. I know that he has dropped off in form, and that's another part of the discussion we can get into. But let's start this off this evening by talking about your first reactions. Were you surprised? Were you not surprised? Do you think Ferrari are making the right move? Do you think Sebastian is making the right move? What do you think is really behind this move? Is it about money? Is it about the fact that he's got this young kid in Charles Leclerc who looks to be, at this stage at least, to have the measure of him, and he doesn't want to go up against him? Is it about power within that Ferrari team? Let's hear your thoughts on that, and then we'll start to change the discussion towards who we think should be filling that seat and where drivers might start moving around. Teamwork F1 says Vettel will be off until 2022 when he'll be back with McLaren Mercedes. Well, that's the other part of the discussion, isn't it, I guess? 2022 is now when the new cars, the new set of regulations, a brand new Formula One, essentially, that I really think Sebastian will be very tempted to want to experience. And yet when it was due to be coming next year, it's now been pushed back to 2022. Perhaps that's part of the reason that he maybe he feels he can't wait that long, or maybe he will take a stopgap year and hang on and keep his involvement in the sport until he can get to drive those cars. That's a very good argument there. Disappointed, says Simon Stansfield. 5-time champ, should have carried on with the fight. Let me see here. It's the right move, says Barry Heron, if Seb is retiring. I'm not surprised at all. I expect him to leave F1, Barry as well. Harvey Howell says, I am surprised that it was done this early in the season, going by the fact that there's been no racing yet this season. Well, I mean, the discussions that must have gone on behind all of this, that we, of course, are not party to, must have all been linked to this contract discussion that he was having with Ferrari. We know, if we're to believe the reports recently, that he was offered a contract initially and turned that down. He was then reportedly offered a second version of that contract, potentially for 2 years, but on a much reduced salary to the one that he's currently enjoying right now. I honestly don't believe it's about money. Sebastian even said in his press release it wasn't about money. I don't believe that's the biggest driving force for somebody like him. So is it more about his status within the team and his power within the team, having some control or at least some influence in that team, which all looks to be moving towards, of course, Charles Leclerc? Badger smelled money, says Cancracker. The honey badger, I presume you're talking about. Maybe the time he spent with his family during quarantine has caused him to realise how much he wants to be with his family, says JT. Well, that's another really good point, and that's another thing he alluded to in the press release, wasn't it? That he's reassessed his priorities in life, or words to that effect. And he does have young children and a wife, and, you know, I think we're all probably reassessing priorities and looking at life differently after what we're all going through and have been through over the last few months. And a Formula One driver at the end of the day is just a human. They're not superhumans, they are just humans, and probably are going through some of the same emotions that many of us are going through right now. Spending a lot of time with family. It's the same for me. I spend a lot of time on the road normally, and to have all the time back at home with family has been amazing and makes me look at life slightly differently. So yes, I wouldn't rule that one out. SF1000 says he wanted a 3-year contract, but Ferrari said bye-bye. I'm not sure about that, you know. I don't know. I think a 2-year contract is pretty standard. There are very few people that get much longer-term contracts than that. That would see him, of course, wouldn't it, up until 2022. I don't think he would necessarily be arguing for much more than that, so I'm not sure about that one. Doesn't want to take any risks, so he may retire with Ferrari, says Will Bennett. Well, that's another thing that may come with reassessing priorities. The risk-taking factor that a Formula One driver has to go through in his life pretty much every day, you know, is a substantial one. Yes, the risks are much lower than they perhaps used to be, but it's still a risk. Again, spending time at home with young children and a wife may well make him reassess those risks. Vettel's never been the same after the German Grand Prix of 2018, says Lotus 98. There are a number of turning points, aren't there, that we can look back on and pinpoint in his career where we can say maybe that's the thing that tipped him over the edge, or maybe that's the thing that started the downturn in performance. And perhaps a lot of that comes in his own head, a psychological downturn that may have affected his performance. But yeah, you may well be right. Does Vettel still think he can cut it, or does he accept that he's falling away and wants to get out? I don't know. That's another point, you know, we're talking about the psychological dramas that Sebastian has had to face, both within his own team and with the media and fans who very quickly, many of them turned against him when he made some of those mistakes. Again, he is human, and to have probably millions of people shouting at you, abusing you, talking you down, telling you that you're past it across the world's media must at some point start to have an effect. There must be very few people that cannot let that have an effect. And it takes an incredibly strong person to overcome all of that, or to put it to one side and not let it creep in. So may well be, that could well be the case. Vettel could want to try and beat Hamilton in an equal car at Mercedes, from my channel. I can't see that, and we will talk more about where drivers might go, but Vettel to Mercedes, certainly whilst Hamilton is there, I can't see. Lots of people have mentioned that to me. I can't see Vettel wanting to put himself up against Lewis. Personally, I don't think he would come out on top in that battle, and he certainly wouldn't come out on top moving to Lewis's home team, where Lewis would have a huge advantage and Sebastian would be playing catch-up straight away. So I really can't see Sebastian becoming teammates voluntarily with Lewis Hamilton. And that feels like a good point to move into the driver merry-go-round. By the way, I'm glad you all like the thumbnail tonight, because it only took me 10 minutes, but as you can probably tell. But that's the first time I've had a go at sort of photoshopping some stuff together. So I thought I was quite pleased with that. So I'm glad you three of you liked that as well. The musical chairs that was representing. Let's talk about that then. Let's talk about drivers going where. And let's start with Ferrari. There's a vacant seat at one of the prime teams on the grid, of course, Ferrari. It's a seat that pretty much everybody you'd think would leap at. And I asked on YouTube earlier, I put a poll up saying who you guys would want to get, in an ideal world, would want to get that seat at Ferrari. Not who you think is going to get it, but who you want to get it. And this was the result. Oops, that didn't work. Hold on. There you go. That is the result. 51% of you saying Daniel Ricciardo would be the man that you would like to see take that Ferrari seat. Sainz coming in second, Hülkenberg in third, followed by Hamilton out of the four that I suggested, and then many of you put your own version, your own solution to that in the comments to that poll as well. But Daniel Ricciardo, a very clear leader out front in that poll. And that was my first reaction. I would love to see Daniel Ricciardo get the chance at Ferrari. I think he's a perfect fit. I think he's exciting. He's obviously a great driver, and many of you seem to agree. Did you still not see the seat at McLaren is the real deal, says Can Cracker. Yeah. Alex Lamas, it's all but confirmed it's Sainz. Yeah, I know, I've seen all the reports, and I know that it feels from all the reports, particularly coming out of Italy, and Andrew Benson at the BBC, who I definitely trust as an F1 reporter. He will have checked and double-checked his sources, corroborated sources, before he put the story on the BBC website. He's saying, and I'd absolutely trust him as I say, that Sainz will go to Ferrari to take that seat. Daniel Ricciardo will go to McLaren to take his seat. Now, he's saying that those deals are very close to being finalised. There's just a few little details being sorted out on both sides, and we will get an announcement over the next few days. I do fully expect that to be the case. But it's interesting. Let's discuss that then. Sainz to Ferrari, first of all. Just Kaz16 says the Fiat seat is a poisoned chalice, and lots of people have made that point as well, that, you know, when I said everybody would jump at the chance at a Ferrari seat, would they? Because is it the perfect seat? I mean, yes, if you're outside of the top 2 or 3 teams on the grid, Ferrari offers a great big step up, as it probably does for Carlos Sainz, a chance to immediately be challenging for race wins, maybe even a championship. I absolutely see the attraction for Carlos Sainz. But for some drivers, let's take somebody like Lewis Hamilton. Why on earth would Lewis Hamilton want to go to Ferrari? This is my opinion on this, because there's another suggestion that lots of people have pointed to me. Why would Lewis Hamilton want to take on what would be a project, a new project, moving to Ferrari? And I say a project in that it must be a medium to long-term project to move to a new team, particularly a team like Ferrari that's as unsettled as it currently is, for somebody at the latter stages of his career that Lewis is, who's currently in, well, let's face it, the best team, the best car, with the best chance of taking his 7th world title, and potentially more than that. So there's no way I can see Lewis moving to Ferrari. He just doesn't have the time left in his career to commit that much to a project, as I say, like that. Carlos Sainz, though, absolutely could. Let's see what you're saying about this. Thoughts on Vettel-Ricciardo partnership at Renault? A Vettel-Ricciardo partnership at Renault. Could they bring Renault forward, and could they work together? They never had any run-ins at Red Bull. That from Jose Summit. Vettel and Ricciardo at Renault. I don't think, well, first of all, I think it does sound like Ricciardo will be on his way to McLaren. And I think Ricciardo, let's be honest, is probably desperate for a way out of Renault, is the first thing. He has not made the right move in going there. It's not worked out for him. Things are looking more and more bleak for Renault. And we've already talked about Renault's future, potential future in the sport. Now they've lost their star man as well. And look, this is no disrespect to Ocon. I think he can do a great job. But they had their hopes pinned on a Daniel Ricciardo. He's now looking like he's about to walk away from that project himself. The team, the organisation, their commitment to Formula One perhaps is on the rocks. Could Vettel end up there? He could, but I just don't see it. He wants to win championships if he's going to stay in Formula One. I can't see him doing that at Renault. James Howe, Sainz to Renault, Ricciardo to McLaren, Bottas to Renault, who quit and our Marc B team, Russell to Marc, Hulk and Delatraz to Haas, Aitken to Williams, Schumacher to Alpha, Giovinazzi, K-Mag and Grosjean leave. Wow, there's a lot to plough through there, James Howe. Thank you very much for that. The interesting one I think I'll pick out of that lot, Bottas to Renault. Lots of people said Bottas could be the guy that could take up that Ferrari seat. And he may well have made a great number 2, as he probably is at Mercedes right now, but is he willing to accept the number 2 role? He's at Mercedes on an equal term contract. He has no number 2 written into his contract. Yes, that's the way it's kind of worked out, but he resets himself every year with the firm belief that he can topple Lewis Hamilton like Nico Rosberg did back in 2016. So he's not ready to take up a number 2 role, I don't think, which looks like what Ferrari are after with the appointment or the reported appointment of Carlos Sainz. And that, again, is no disrespect to Carlos Sainz, because he will go to Ferrari firmly believing that he can win races, that he can win championships. I don't believe that Carlos would go there taking a number 2 role in his contract. So I'm hoping that he will have negotiated equal terms, at least equal status on that basis, and will be able to fight. And somehow they'll find a natural order between the two. Nobody's mentioned Alonso in this, says 1,000 subs with no videos challenge. Right, let's get on to the Alonso debate very quickly. No one's mentioned Alonso. I mean, actually, lots of people have mentioned Alonso. I'm going to say that there's no way I can see Fernando going to Ferrari, at least, because I think he's a destabilising influence. Ferrari are building a team around Charles Leclerc. Fernando is not going to go there and play second fiddle. And even if Fernando were to go there and be quick enough to start challenging Leclerc, he's not going to be one that will settle for second best. He will want to, as I mentioned in my video the other day, wrestle power within that team towards him. And there's nothing wrong necessarily with that. That is what a driver kind of needs to do to get on and be the very best. But Ferrari is not the place for that to happen right now that they're building around Charles Leclerc. That's not to say that Alonso couldn't end up somewhere else. And I guess if we're going to say where he could end up, probably Renault might be the best option for him. He has major connections there. And if he is finding a way back into Formula One or wants to find a way back in, perhaps Renault could be the way to do that, but I'm not convinced. Chris A says Alonso will never race in F1 again. The teams will make sure of it. Well, he has burnt a lot of bridges. Renault perhaps the only place he probably could do on that one. Alonso could be a McLaren driver again. I can't see that. I know I said that after the first time around, but I really can't see that. I just don't see why McLaren would want him. And that, again, without disrespecting Fernando, he's not the right fit, I don't think. And if they have got Daniel Ricciardo, that's a great move for McLaren. Can you imagine, by the way, Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris as teammates? I mean, how are they going to get any work done? They just won't stop laughing all weekend. It will be great for the guys inside that McLaren garage to have a bit of fun. They've had it already, haven't they, with Sainz and Lando? You can imagine that goes up about 10 levels if Daniel Ricciardo rocks up at the team. Let's see. Jackie Twix says, I'll do it for 50 quid and a box of cheese and onion crisps. Yeah, well, luckily Ferrari are not short of a few quid, so they probably won't be taking you up on that. Rob Graham, Kimi to Ferrari. Again, loads of people have mentioned that one. Could he go back as a bit of a stopgap? Again, I don't think that's likely to happen. I think his time at Ferrari is done. I think Kimi enjoyed it. I think he did, he likes being in a fast car, of course he does, but I just can't see Ferrari taking another step backwards, which is what it would feel like for them. They're trying to build a team at Ferrari, as I say, around Charles Leclerc. They're trying to build for the future. They've got to start getting better and better and better. Sainz could be a decent part of that programme. Ricciardo for me would have been perhaps a better one, but Sainz, a very good choice. So I can't see them taking a backward step like that. Roy Ferntorp says Lando and Daniel's a great fit at McLaren, absolutely. Kvyat to Ferrari possible, says Kale Meeks, sorry. Danny Kvyat perhaps would have been a good shot if they were looking to go for an outright number 2 driver. It feels to me, and let me know what you think of this, it feels to me that Ferrari, in taking Sainz, if that is indeed what happens, is they're not going for an all-out subservient number 2, but they are looking for someone who's perhaps not going to really, on the face of it, really threaten Charles Leclerc. I mean, what do you think of that? And again, I mean, no disrespect to Carlos Sainz in that, because I think on his day, he will threaten Charles Leclerc, but not in terms of his presence in the team, not in terms of an overall sustained championship assault. Of course, time will tell if indeed he does end up there. Kun Aguero to McLaren, says Craig O'Brien. Absolutely. Didn't he do well at the weekend? Did you see that? In the F1 esports race, Aguero was in the, I think it was in the Haas. Was he in the Haas car? I can't remember. But he was racing and actually did a really decent job. So you can tell what he does in his spare time when he's not playing football. Magnussen to Ferrari, says blue, blah, blah. Magnussen would have been a good shout, in my opinion, actually. He would have been one of those dark horses that if they'd taken him, if they go for him, which of course they still could, no announcements yet, he could actually be quite a feisty character. Again, maybe not the sort of calmness that Sainz might bring to a team like Ferrari, but a good feisty guy in the car that may well deliver some exciting results. Jack Aitken could end up at Renault, says Will Bennett. Yeah, that's a good shout. Jack Aitken, one of the young drivers at Renault on the Renault programme, a decent driver, and that's not a million miles off. If they can't get a big marquee driver, and if they are looking to save some money, and if Renault are looking at some kind of exit strategy from our sport over the next couple of years, which they could well be doing, somebody like a Jack Aitken alongside Ocon may well be a decent shout. So yeah, good point. Let's see. Sam Fuka says, who's your pick if Sainz leave McLaren? Well, my pick is Daniel Ricciardo. I think he'd be a great fit. He had talks with McLaren, let's not forget, before going to Renault. And I think, as far as I know from talking to people, those talks were quite far down the line. And it was only at the last minute Renault swept in with a pretty substantial offer and tempted him away. But I think Daniel Ricciardo was very close to coming to McLaren. So I think McLaren would still love to have him. And I think if he does make the signing, it's a great fit alongside Lando and in a great team. So I'd be really excited for that to happen. If I was still working at McLaren, personally, I'd be very excited about Daniel Ricciardo turning up in the team. And that is important, give the guys in the garage a boost is an important one. One Tapia says, Jenson Button will join Ferrari. Don't think so. Giovinazzi to Ferrari and we riot. Giovinazzi was one of the names in the hat that everybody was talking about. And again, kind of falls down, doesn't it, to what Ferrari want out of this. Do they want a clear number 2 driver, or do they want somebody who will pick up race wins in amongst the ones that Leclerc can't win, that as a pairing they can take this challenge on and perhaps win a constructors title? I think Sainz ticks that box for them. Giovinazzi, I don't think he's ready for that role yet. Maybe in the future, but not yet. And I do know, I'm well aware that he's obviously part of that Ferrari programme, but perhaps the Ferrari programme doesn't have anybody ready in line yet to step up, and that's the reason they may well be going for somebody like Sainz. Hamilton and Vettel to swap seats would be interesting, says LDG MAV86. It would be interesting, but as I've mentioned before, I can't see how. don't know why it does that. It must be a timer thing. I'll sort that out next time, don't worry. I can't see Hamilton going to Ferrari. And in all honesty, I can't see Mercedes taking a Sebastian Vettel. Even if Lewis were to move on or retire or whatever, I can't see Sebastian Vettel being able to take that seat. He's the guy, don't forget, Sebastian Vettel, that Mercedes have beaten consistently over the last few years on a number of occasions, down to some of the mistakes that Sebastian has made. The whole world has seen those, Mercedes have seen those. I can't see that they would want to replace somebody like a Lewis Hamilton with a Sebastian Vettel at this point in his career, I'm afraid. Also, of course, George Russell, a few of you mentioning there, George Russell on the Mercedes programme, and probably being teed up to replace Lewis Hamilton whenever that time comes. It may be another 2 years, but I think if George Russell can get a decent year under his belt this year at Williams, he may well take a seat, perhaps Bottas' seat next year, but I do think he's being lined up as the next big star, potential star for Mercedes, and I don't think they're going to want to let him go from that Mercedes programme personally. Hulkenberg to Mercedes as safety car driver, says Aidan. Harsh. Hulkenberg would have been a stopgap, wouldn't he, if Ferrari had taken him. He would have been pretty dependable, but uninspiring, unexciting if you're a Ferrari fan. Let's hear from Ferrari fans. You know, what do you think? What do you think of Sainz coming to your team? You're a passionate bunch, Ferrari fans. Is that a good move? Are you excited by that? Would you have been more excited if it was Daniel Ricciardo coming to the team? I'd really love to hear from some Ferrari fans. Let's see. Go Albon to Ferrari. He's consistent, good personality, and he's not going to step on Leclerc's toes, says Stuart Warby. Alex Albon, I think actually he's very, very grateful to Red Bull. They have transformed his career and his life, and I think at the moment he's still very early in that process with Red Bull. I think he's been shown some faith, hasn't he, to be given that seat full time alongside Max. Now he has to repay that, and I think he will want to deliver on that. So can't see him moving. Gasly to Ferrari, don't think so. Do you think this is the end of Danny Rick's World Driver Championship dreams? That's a good point. Daniel Ricciardo, he's kind of missed out. If this is all the case, that he's going to miss out on the Ferrari seat, has it been the end? Is this the end of his World Championship title dreams? It could well be, couldn't it? I mean, never say never. And I'd love to see him take a title with McLaren, of course. You know, ultimately, I'll always be a McLaren fan somewhere deep in here. So I would love to see him bring the team back onto the top step. But I think there's a little way off that yet. Mercedes engines will be a big boost for the team, and of course will be a big part of why he's looking perhaps to come back to McLaren. But can they overturn the might of the Mercedes factory team? I don't think so, not yet. 2022, of course, will be the next big reset where there's opportunity for everybody. If we're going by fans, many fans feel like Alonso has unfinished business with Ferrari. Would love to see him in that seat, although it's not going to happen, says H3 Lil Dream, I think that is. I think you're right. I don't think it's going to happen. Whether we want to see it or not, I don't think it's going to happen. BBC says Carlos is going to Ferrari. Yes. Kay Spencer, yeah, that is all the talk, and we fully expect that to be confirmed over the next few days. Jimmer to Ferrari, says Jessica Johnston. Did you see Jimmer's tweet where he'd superimposed his own caricature onto a Ferrari race suit? I'd love to see Jimmer get a proper shot in a decent racing car, real life racing car. I know he's tested a few, but I'd love to see him get a proper test, wouldn't you? He's done really well. I'm really pleased for Jimmy. He's on an absolute roll at the moment. Sirotkin to Renault. I mean, maybe, but again, is that something that they might bring some money into the team, which they need? But again, it's not an exciting move, is it? For either party, really. Verstappen to Ferrari. Let's talk about that. Oh, bud, Verstappen to Ferrari. Again, first of all, he's locked in at Red Bull for a long time. He's the first one, wasn't he, to be tied down. I think him and Leclerc to be tied into long-term contracts. So if Ferrari were going to take Verstappen, and let's face it, he's a great driver, one of the hottest properties on the grid. it would be insanely expensive to get him out of that Red Bull contract. And I know that Ferrari have perhaps the biggest budget on the grid, and also let's be clear that the budget cap doesn't include driver salaries, so that's not a factor in any of this. But to buy Max Verstappen out of a brand new, fresh, long-term Red Bull contract, they are not going to let him go easily. That would be insanely expensive. So for that reason alone, I just cannot see that happening. Rajat Jain says, Vettel to Aston Martin. Now, this was another one I mentioned the other day. Vettel to Aston Martin. It could be on the basis that this is a team with a huge cash injection, that all the new regulations in terms of budget cap are swinging towards them, in that they're a team that are going to be somewhere around that figure and therefore don't have to adapt, so they're not going to be compromised when the budget cap comes in. Same with probably Renault, same with McLaren. They're going to be somewhere around that budget cap level anyway. Perhaps Aston Martin are below that at the moment, but could achieve that budget cap level without too much compromise to the team. Whereas the big teams are going to have to start laying people off. They're going to have to make compromises to get themselves down to the new budget cap. So the guys in the middle of the field do have a potential advantage in that sense, and that would be a building project, wouldn't it, with Aston Martin? Aston, of course, has some history, which Sebastian loves, but it's a big move where he's not going to win a championship straight off the bat. So, I don't know, I'm not sure on that one. I think it's an outside chance. The Stig to fate all forgetting about him, says Johnny Tyrrell. The Stig, yeah, could he end up in Formula One? Will Buxton to Ferrari, says Sam Buttle. Did you see the video with Will the other day? I hope you did. Check it out. Loads of kids asking really cute questions, and Will was brilliant. I really appreciate him coming onto the channel. He answered some questions in brilliant fashion. Some of the answers involved ice cream and glitter. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. That was from Monday. That's the kids special. Who says Claire Priestley to Ferrari? I hope she's watching in the other room. Let's see, what else have we got? Bottas out, Russell to Mercedes, Chadwick to Williams, says Reap 3R84. Okay, that's not a wild and crazy one, is it? Russell to Mercedes, we've already talked about. Chadwick to Williams. Jamie Chadwick on the books, of course, as a test driver or reserve driver at the moment. I think she is simulator driver, development driver, I think the title is. Could she take the step up? Personally, I don't think even she thinks she's ready to do that just yet. And with no racing happening at the moment so far in 2020, maybe she's still not ready. But I think at some point, I'd love to see Jamie excel over the next 12 months and be given a shot in Formula One. I don't think there's any reason why that couldn't happen at a team like Williams. Will Bennett says Cyril wants driver salaries to be in the budget cap. Well, yeah, that's that's interesting, isn't it? Since he's spending an absolute fortune right now on Daniel Ricciardo. Interesting that if that's about to go and he's about to save a load of money on drivers, he wants that including, absolutely. There you go, Claire Priestley agrees that she should get a Ferrari. Do you need a mechanic, darling? Alan Stewart says, Mark, how much would Seb be a loss to the sport? He's a great personality. And look, that's a good way to sort of sum up the Sebastian Vettel thing. I do think he'd be a loss to the sport. And I know that in recent times, he's made mistakes on track he's made mistakes in terms of his performance. He's made mistakes in terms of the way he's reacted to certain situations. And they haven't been great. He's let himself down on a number of occasions, but he's still a 4-time world champion. He's still one of the elder statesmen of our sport who holds this sport in incredibly high regard. He has a huge understanding of the tradition and of the history of Formula One, and not many drivers on the grid have that to the same level. So I do think the sport will miss Sebastian when and if he goes. Will we miss him on the racetrack? We're not going to miss him as much as we did a few years ago, unfortunately, because the performance, the results, just haven't been there. It's a shame. It's a shame that combination, as I said in my video the other day, I think Sebastian Vettel would have made a great Ferrari world champion. I think they were a perfect fit to come together and be successful. You know, if they'd had success, it would have looked great in the history books. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, unless, of course, they have some crazy second half of 2020 and come out on top. But if you look at the pre-season testing performance, doesn't look like Ferrari were that strong. Let's see. Where do you think Lando will go, says Dean Arnold. I think he'll stay exactly where he is. I think Lando is very happy at McLaren. I think he's in a good place. He's cutting his teeth. He's learning his craft. He's very comfortable there. And I don't see him going anywhere at the moment. I don't think he feels like he needs to go anywhere at the moment. What he needs to do, particularly when he gets, or if he gets a new teammate, and if that's Daniel Ricciardo, he needs to step it up, because he'll be very quickly will be measured against Daniel Ricciardo, and that will be the measure of how good we think he really is. Let's see, what have we got? Vettel wins 2020 title and retires. That's Sofia Di Salvo. Vettel wins 2020 title. Will he win the title? I don't think so. I mean, anything could happen. This is a strange year. Strange things are going to happen. We may get no racing. That is a possibility. We may get some racing. And if we get a very compressed season, it's going to be the drivers and the teams that make the fewest mistakes. Let's say we get a calendar of 10 races. Every one of those 10 races is going to count even more, isn't it? The opportunity to let mistakes happen and not have it affect your championship challenge is going to start disappearing very quickly. So the guys who are going to be consistent, quick out the box, are going to be the ones that are going to do well in 2020, if indeed we do get any racing happening. Seb returned to Red Bull, says, will he go to Red Bull? I don't think that's going to happen. I think it would have been a nice little fairy tale, but I do think that Red Bull have moved on since Sebastian Vettel. I think Sebastian was very quick at Red Bull in a specific type of car, which took a specific type of driving style. And of course, at the time, they built the team pretty much around him. They can't do that now because they're building a team around Max Verstappen, and the cars, the technology have moved on. And what we've seen from Sebastian so far is that he hasn't yet managed to extract the very best out of the modern Formula One cars on a consistent basis. So I don't think he's going to end up back at Red Bull. But, you know, that's an outside shot. Kimi and Vettel to retire at the end of the season, says Adam Elliott. I would not be surprised. I know that lots of people have been talking about Sebastian Vettel talking to other teams, and of course he'll be talking to teams, he'll be talking to lots of people to see what options are out there. He may well decide to stick around to see these 22 cars come in, but I wouldn't be surprised if he retires. When it comes to Kimi, I honestly believed, and maybe I still do, that Kimi will stick out for one more year in Formula One at Alfa. But this Ferrari merry-go-round may potentially change that if they feel like they need to get their Ferrari Driver Academy program moving on. And therefore, do they need to get somebody like a Mick Schumacher into Formula One, maybe in an Alfa, to give him some experience and to assess him? That could be the thing that finally tips Kimi out of Formula One. But as things were standing, I honestly feel like Kimi was looking like, or Alfa were looking like wanting to retain him to steady the ship, to keep things going whilst they bring up Giovinazzi and whilst they build that team. So I don't know, I'm not sure on Kimi. He doesn't give a lot away, but we'll have to wait and see. Pascal Wehrlein to Renault. Unlikely, but the guy deserves a place in F1, says Samuel Santos. Pascal Wehrlein, currently a Ferrari simulator driver, isn't he? So he's one of the guys that has a connection. I don't think he's rated highly enough, or was rated highly enough in Formula One. Whether he deserves to be rated highly on more than that, I don't know. But does he deserve to have another shot in Formula One at a top team? I'm not sure. I don't think Formula One fraternity would necessarily think that. Okay, let's finish this off. Look, we've gone 40 minutes. Let's give it another 5 minutes. Vettel to go to Sauber to join Kimi and Kubica in leading the team, says Marco Bokic. Could he end up at Sauber? I can't see that. I just don't think so. I think if Sebastian Vettel is going to stay in Formula One, he will be doing that because he wants to try and win another title. He's always said that, hasn't he? That's why he would stay in the sport. So my own feeling is that I can't see him hanging around in a back of the grid team. Maybe he could go to a team in the middle of the grid that's on the way up, that's building a project like an Aston, but I just don't know. I can honestly see Sebastian starting to think about retiring if he hasn't thought about that already. Stephen K says, isn't it amazing that Grosjean's outlasted Vettel? Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of time, possibly, not in terms of results. Mika to finally end his sabbatical, says Amar Terzic. Well, yeah, Mika's still on that sabbatical, isn't he? From McLaren all those years ago. Could Kimi go to Ferrari for a year? We've covered that, I don't think so. Perez, Seamus Stacey says Perez. Perez was another one that could have well been in the mix, a name that was being thrown around, and I wouldn't have been surprised if he'd been called up. But for me, he'd be another one of these that wasn't exciting. It wasn't an exciting move from a Ferrari's perspective. It would have been a very safe move. And I think Ferrari need to be looking to be exciting. If they want to take on Mercedes, if they want to win world championships, constructors and drivers, they've got to be exciting and aggressive in their driver lineup. Right, let's get a last couple of questions in. Doesn't have to be about drivers, anything you like. And we'll do a last couple of minutes before we go. Maybe Kimi will return to Ferrari. No, don't think so. Kevin Magnussen, covered that. What else we got? Magnussen to Ferrari. Bottas to Ferrari. He'd be a good teammate. Disrupt balance at Mercedes, says Varun Sambi. He would be a good teammate, but as I said earlier on, I don't think he will want to take up an official number 2 role. I'm not sure he'd be better off there than he is right now at Mercedes. Perez to Ferrari, says placeholder. Bottas to Ferrari. Stroll, haven't heard of him. Not sure Stroll will find his way that far up the grid just yet. Rosberg. Now, lots of you, let's see who's that. João Diaz says Rosberg. And actually, I don't think for a second Rosberg will be coming back into Formula One, let alone at Ferrari. But lots of people were talking about that, weren't they? As potentially coming back as a short-term prospect, a bit like a Hulkenberg type move. But there's absolutely no way that's going to happen. Donkey Donga says, Elvis, are you going for dreads again? No. Vettel takes a break in 2021 and to Panthera in 2022. That's the potential new team coming in when the new regs kick in 2022. I don't think so again, unless he were to buy the team and build something as a, come to Formula One from a different perspective. That's something that Vettel's talked about in the past. Claire Priestley to be CEO of F1, no more Ferrari deals. Could you see yourself as a mechanic at Aston Martin? No, my days as an F1 mechanic are over, not because I don't necessarily feel like I could do it. I'm sure I could. I've got enough experience. I'm capable enough, I'm sure. It's actually more that I've kind of done that, and Formula One has changed so much since I was there last in the pit lane, last inside the garage, that I really enjoyed my time. And when I go and hang out with my mates now who are still at the team and at other teams in the pit lane, the sport is very different. The life of a Formula One mechanic today is very different. I was very lucky to catch the tail end of an era that had the tobacco money. So the sport was rich at the time. When I first started at least, there were no such things as camera phones and Twitter and social media. So we were under far less of a spotlight. It's now a very corporate world where you're representing a corporate brand much more, which makes it much more of a serious role within the team. There's nothing bad about that, but it does take away a lot of the fun side of the sport that for me was a really attractive part of it. And yes, I love the technical side. I love the process of being in the pits. Being part of a pit stop is the one thing I miss more than anything about working at a team in Formula One. That's still the one thing today that I miss, and probably always will, the adrenaline rush of a pit stop. But I just can't see myself ever going back to that, mainly actually above all of those things, because I love what I do now. I've got a nice variation of things, from media to this here on YouTube, which I really enjoy. Lots of other things going on at the same time, all loosely in some way or another related to Formula One and motorsport. And I really enjoy this sort of second phase of career. So I can't see myself ever going back to the pit lane hands-on like that. Seb and Lewis to Williams, says Marc Samways. Wouldn't that be a turn up? That would catch the media out, wouldn't it, if they announced that in a couple of days' time. Let's see, last couple. Over 1,200 viewing tonight. Yeah, you're the man, one. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you who've taken part. I really do appreciate it. Let me wrap this up then by, unless anyone's got anything, we ran out of ideas. Your pick for Ferrari, my pick is Ricciardo, says Varun Sambi. Well, my pick was Ricciardo. It does very much look like it's going to be Carlos Sainz up alongside Charles Leclerc, highly likely to be announced over the next couple of days. Daniel Ricciardo looks like he's going the other way to McLaren to take up that seat alongside Lando Norris. It sounds like, from reading the reports from journalists and people that I trust, that it's the last few details on either end of that tie-up to be worked out before it's announced, but probably that's going to be happening over the next few days, so keep an eye on that. Maybe we can come later in the week. Let me wrap this up by saying tomorrow I'm doing a YouTube video with the game director of the Codemasters F1 game. So the game that they're using in the F1 Esports Championship right now, a game that I love and play a lot right here. I'm talking to the game director for a video that I'm making here on YouTube. So if you have any questions, I said this on Twitter and Instagram today, if you have any questions that you'd love to know about that game, I've got loads already, but if you've got any really interesting ones, I will put some of those to him tomorrow and we can feature that in a video which you'll probably see next week. I'm really interested to see how they tie up with the actual teams, with the actual circuits, get the engineering model into the game, things like the tyre model. How do they scan the tracks? I know they scan some tracks, but do they scan them all? I think there's so much of interest that I hope you'll be interested in too, that I'm going to try and find out and put all together in one video, which I hope you'll love. So thank you very much. Drop those into the comments or drop them onto my Twitter or Instagram that you can see up there. I will collect all of those comments if you pop them in there. So thank you, I appreciate them all. I think we better leave it there because it's now 10 to 10 here in the UK, and for some of you it must be either very late at night or very early in the morning. You can get yourselves off to bed or up to work, wherever you are. I really appreciate you joining, so thank you very much everybody, and I will see you again very, very soon. Ta-da!